Okay, Hey Arnold was one of those fantastic shows back in the 1990s. In 1996, of October 7th of that year, we were introduced while during the years of Ren and Stimpy, our real monsters, and various other wacky shows that we were used to, where wacky characters were in, and they were so unpredictable. Someone brought us back to the block really of sanity, and brought us a character, a football-headed kid named Arnold, and pretty much did the reverse of what pretty much other cartoon shows were trying to attempt at the time. So why do we go in this direction, and what kind of legacy does it have today in the 21st century, 15 years on from when the first Hey Arnold cartoon was launched? There was 200 plus episodes, and well, we're not going to go through every single one of them, but let's try and cover as much as we can. Joining us on the phone is, I have to be honest with you, I'm actually quite nervous. This is my child, well, part of my childhood. A guy who entertained me as a very young person, and I still watch the show even to this day. Craig Hey Arnold Bartlett, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I may, let's start from the very beginning. Let's start in the humble times. I think, how did Arnold come to exist? I mean, how did you come up with the character?
Okay, so I started my animation career in Portland, Oregon, doing claymation. Where we were doing tabletop animation with clay figures for a guy named Will Vinton, and that was really the only game in town up in the Northwest United States. That was the only animation work there was. But I wanted to do my own show at some point, which I think most animators, deep down they would like to have their own character and do their own show. So I was sort of thinking about that even then. And I got my first job in Hollywood in 1987. I came down to do Pee-wee's Playhouse, and I did the Penny cartoon segment of Pee-wee. That season, the second and third seasons of Pee-wee in L.A., I was down here. And I ended up just moving here with my wife thinking, no, what the heck, I'll take a shot and see what I could do. So that summer of '88, I decided I had been doing this penny cartoon. I don't know if you're familiar with the penny cartoon. It's clay, but it's on glass,
Yeah.
and so it doesn't have an armature, and she's able to kind of float around because she's on glass, and the camera's shooting down through the glass. And I really liked that technique, and so I made three little claymation Arnold shorts. And basically, I just thought, okay, I'm going to create a character that is sort of like me when I was about 5. And those first Arnolds were, all he did was kind of daydream his way through. The first one was called Arnold Escapes from Church,
Oh
and
yeah, I remember that
he's
one.
sitting in church, and the congregation is reading the 23rd Psalm, and Arnold is just daydreaming the content, which was very much like Penny. It was really influenced by Penny, because Penny would, when she said it, you saw it. Things would metamorphose right in front of you as Penny described something, and that was what I was doing with Arnold then. And I made two more. The next two were for Sesame Street. One was called Arnold Rides a Chair, and I can't remember what the third one was called. Oh, it
Oh,
doesn't
I'm
matter.
trying
It
to
was
have
a
a think
long
now.
time ago.
Yeah, it was a
And
long time ago. Yeah.
but Arnold was made of clay, and he was only about 5 years old. But I had these, and he didn't say anything. He was basically mute. He just sat there and daydreamed.
Yeah.
And when I came to, I had gotten my first job at Nickelodeon shortly after that. I worked on Rugrats' first season as a story editor, and I directed a couple and wrote a bunch of them. And that was my introduction to Nickelodeon. And I said, hey, I've got this idea of a show. It's about this little daydreaming kid named Arnold. That was about '93, where I first had that meeting with Mary Harrington, who was the Nick animation exec. And she really liked some comics I had done. I had done Arnold comics as well, where I was drawing him in 2D. I did these comics for a very early Simpsons magazine called Simpsons Illustrated, and she thought they were really funny drawings, and she said, would you be able to do Arnold as a 2D cartoon, more of a traditional, cell animated cartoon? And I said, sure, that'd be fine. And mostly because I realized I didn't really want to do the work of a half hour show all in claymation, especially in that really kind of limited technique of the down shooter like Penny style. That it'd be hard to sustain that for 22 minutes. And so I made the first Arnold pilot. That was in spring of '94, and that pilot turned into the episode 24 Hours to Live.
Yeah, I
Which
believe there was
played in
three
the first season.
variations of that. I believe there was
Yeah,
there was the comic book, which was Arnold narrowly avoids the thrashing. Then there was the pilot episode that aired before Harriet the Spy in
exactly.
movies, and then there was
Good,
the
so you've
actual
seen
episode.
that too. Yeah, that original version.
Oh, I hated Harriet the
That
Spy. That was a
that
terrible movie.
the pilot that played in the theaters. It's cool. It's got its own look. We kind of solidified the look a little more when we went into our first season. We changed colors a little bit and changed the backgrounds a little bit and sort of tightened it up into what the series became. And there was always a kind of a metamorphosis going on for all 5 seasons of Hey Arnold. The look continued to sort of slowly change, and that's the nature of it. You just keep making them and learn new tricks as you go. But that's basically it. That pilot that became 24 Hours to Live was the first Arnold story, and that was finished by summer of '94, and then in January of '95, Nickelodeon decided to go ahead and pick up the series, and they ordered 20 half hours in the January of '95. So we worked on it from January of '95 until at the end of our first season, they decided to hold off for another year, and they didn't put it on the air here in the United States until October '96.
Really? Were you kind of worried at
Yeah,
that point?
and
Were
it
you
was
worried
really
at that
because
point?
I was so happy because I got to tell you, especially if you compare it to now, things are so in a hurry now, and things have to prove themselves out immediately. You have to get good ratings, good numbers as soon as you go on the air, or something might just get canceled. And instead they had 20 half hours they were just sitting on, going, you know what, we're going to do a new primetime initiative at Nickelodeon, and we're going to start these shows at 8 o'clock at night instead of in the afternoon. And so we're going to save Arnold for that block, and it'll be the Monday and Wednesday show on our new primetime block. And so it was really nice. They treated it like their flagship show for the primetime move, and it did really well. And they were perfectly happy to wait and hold on. And I think that even if it hadn't done so well, they still would have been okay just to kind of find an audience for it, which you just don't experience anymore.
Yeah.
People are a
I
lot
was
more
gonna say,
nervous now.
did in Arnold, when Arnold debuted, when Hey Arnold came in and the first season aired, did it was it really warmly responsive, or did it kind of like have the Faulty Towers effect, with John Cleese, where basically it took a while for people basically to get hold of it?
It actually did really well. It was the first season. It was one of the top-rated cable shows, or cable kids shows, and I think it was that primetime block was an immediate success for Nickelodeon. And they just, the '90s were a really successful time for Nickelodeon. They just put out new shows. They immediately found an audience. They really ruled kids TV in the '90s, and everybody followed them. Disney and Cartoon Network basically came along behind and were based on the really successful model that Nickelodeon made. So my timing was so great. I mean,
Yeah.
I always felt like I came into TV animation at a perfect time for me. At that point in the mid '90s, it was kind of an artist market. All the artists thought, well, I can have my own show too.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it was just because there was so much going on, and it was doing really well.
Yeah. I'd like to talk about one or two episodes, if I may. I'd like to go through just one or two out of a season. And one
Sure.
episode that caught out my eye was the episode Eugene's Bike, because apparently,
Yeah.
from what I've been told, in 2000, this actually saved a young girl's life, if I'm correct.
That's right. Actually, there were 3 examples of the Heimlich maneuver being performed out there because some kid had seen it on Hey Arnold.
Yeah,
3
just
times
just to,
it
just to
happened.
clarify for our listeners, basically, Eugene's Bike. There was a particular scene, and if you've not seen it, then try and get hold of a copy, because basically it's a scene where Eugene is choking on a character called Eugene is choking on a hot dog, and Arnold is given a pamphlet about the Heimlich maneuver and actually performs it on Eugene. To I say half and half success.
The thing that's funny about it, one was it was so great. The 2 little girls that were the first example of somebody being saved by the Heimlich maneuver because they'd seen it on Hey Arnold. It was 2 little girls right here in L.A. And so we invited them over to the studio, and I got to meet them and their mothers, and it was so fun. They were adorable kids, and they gave a great interview for the news because they were just so cute. They were, they were these really sweet kids, and her friend, the one girl was choking on a what do they call those little they're like a hard
Jawbreakers.
candy. Yeah, jawbreaker. She was sucking on a jawbreaker while they were playing handball,
Yeah.
and so she started to choke.
I'm trying to visualize that.
Isn't it crazy? And she started to choke, and she was pointing to her throat, and making faces and turning blue. And her
Ouch.
friend got behind her and performed the Heimlich and popped it out. And then the parents were freaking out, and they'd called the fire department came.
Fire
And
department.
so by the time the fire department came, it was over. And they said, "Well, how did you know what to do?" And she said, "Well, I saw it on a show called Hey Arnold."
Yeah,
and
that's just amazing,
and
isn't
then
it?
later in that same year, a kid Heimlicked his mom who was choking on a steak. That was up in Seattle. And then another kid in Arizona Heimlicked her little 1-year-old sister who was choking on I think like a ball or something like that. And all three of those, they had the same story. They all said they saw it on Hey Arnold.
Yeah.
And what was funny about it too is, in the context is Eugene in the cartoon. Arnold's trying to give him a perfect day, and they're out just doing one thing after another in this kind of montage that was basically a spoof of the montage in an old movie called To Sir with Love. The music is a direct rip-off of the music in To Sir with Love. And the point is, Eugene's choking on a hot dog because everything's going wrong for Eugene.
Yeah.
Arnold Heimlichs him, and then the hot dog shoots out of his mouth, bounces off several things, and then hits Eugene in the eye. And the next scene, he's got an eye patch. So the irony is so hilarious, And I would say too, I would just mention that Eugene's Bike is one of our very first shows, and it's got all the elements that we were trying to put in an Arnold episode. We were always trying to find an episode where Arnold, through no fault of his own, causes somebody else to have something bad happen, and then Arnold feels really bad, and then he tries to do something about it. And that last scene at the end of Eugene's Bike, when Arnold's apologizing for everything that's gone wrong that day, and Eugene tells him, "Hey, you know what? This is more than anyone's ever done for me before, and I just want to thank you." And then he gets his hand, as he's shaking hands with Arnold, he gets his hand
And
stuck
jumped
in
in
the
bus door.
and then
Yeah.
Arnold looks at him and shrugs and goes, and then he walks
That's
off
the way
into
it goes.
into the sunset. All that stuff, that is the classic Hey Arnold stuff. That was exactly what we were trying to do. And when I saw it, that was the B show of our very first episode. It was Downtown as Fruits and then Eugene's Bike.
Yeah.
That to me was our first half hour we put out, and it had everything that I wanted this series to have, and I was really happy with that first half hour, especially with that ending, because it's so it's so kind of twisted and bittersweet, and it's really meant to be that way. Like Arnold does a little tiny bit of good, but it's kind of undercut with sort of dark humor, and that's why I really love Eugene's Bike. It's still a funny episode to me after all these years.
Let's talk about the world that Hey Arnold is in. Basically, it's he seems to be the neutral guy, which is at the time was unheard of, and basically all the craziness was going on around him. So he had his crazy border house family. He had his the kids at the school were also pretty mad in themselves as well, and also you had various other characters coming in. Was that? Why did you decide to go in that direction instead of having Arnold as the crazy one basically, and he caused basically the mayhem?
Well, I was sort of my childhood as I grew up. I kind of felt like I was the kid who just was observing all this stuff. I had a really deep inner life, and I wasn't good at sports. I wasn't particularly smart. I wasn't particularly funny, and I just was like watching all this stuff. And so I thought it'd be funny to make Arnold be really kind of the quiet one, and he evolved more, of course, as we went. But I started saying,